first image appeared on my screen during what should have been an ordinary workday. Or at least it was supposed to be ordinary. I was going through my daily data analysis routine at Nakamura Technologies when I noticed something that looked like a system error. Among the thousands of deep ocean scan data points, a perfectly geometric structure stood out. At first, I thought it was some kind of software anomaly, a glitch in the sonar data. A structure so symmetrical, over 10,000 meters deep in the Mariana Trench, simply couldn't exist. I rubbed my eyes and reprocessed the data. The algorithm confirmed it. There was something down there. Something that shouldn't be there. Soon after, new images started coming in, each clearer than the last, confirming the presence of an artificial structure in the deepest part of the ocean. It was a pyramid, too perfect to be a natural formation, too massive to be ignored. As head of advanced data analysis, I had privileged access to information few people in the world even knew existed. Mr. Hiroshi Nakamura had established confidential agreements with various military and research agencies to obtain high-resolution data from satellites and underwater probes. Officially, we were mapping potential sites for rare material mining. But I knew there was more to it than that. Nakamura was a reserved man, one of the wealthiest individuals on the planet, with interests far beyond corporate profits. He held a particular fascination with anomalies, phenomena that defied conventional explanation. I never imagined we would find something as extraordinary as that submerged pyramid. I hesitated before reporting the discovery. It was too big, too strange, but my position required me to share information of that magnitude. I prepared a preliminary report and requested a meeting with Nakamura himself. The meeting happened the same day, which was unusual considering the CEO's packed schedule. I presented the images carefully, explaining the technical aspects of the discovery and why I believed it wasn't a natural formation. As I spoke, I watched Nakamura's expression. He didn't show the surprise I expected, but rather a deep, calculated interest. "I want you to assemble a team. Complete discretion," he said, after a few minutes of contemplative silence. His words were direct, and his tone left no room for questions. "We'll use the Tenshi Maru. You have 2 weeks." I was momentarily speechless. The Tenshi Maru was Nakamura Technologies' most secretive project, a deep-sea submersible capable of withstanding extreme pressures, something the public didn't even know existed. The vessel represented technological advances years ahead of anything currently on the market. And I, a data analyst who spent most of my time in front of computer screens, would be responsible for leading the scientific expedition. I left Nakamura's office with my mind racing. 2 weeks to prepare a mission that would take humans to the most inaccessible point on Earth. The challenge seemed almost as impossible as the pyramid's very existence. But there was also a sense of purpose, of standing on the edge of something that could fundamentally change our understanding of the world. I immediately began assembling the team. We needed specialists in various fields. Discreet, courageous people willing to accept a mission without asking too many questions. The first person I contacted was Dr. Eleanor Chen, a marine geologist from the University of Tokyo, known for her groundbreaking work on underwater structures. She accepted almost instantly, driven by the scientific curiosity sparked by the preliminary images. To pilot the submersible, I recruited Commander Ramirez, a Navy veteran with deep-sea operation experience. He had participated in classified missions involving nuclear submarines and was familiar with the unique challenges posed by extreme pressure. His expertise would be vital to the team's safety. I also invited Dr. Abbasi, a linguist specializing in ancient scripts. At the time, it seemed like an odd choice. Why would we need a linguist to examine a submerged structure? But something about the faint symbols visible in the high-resolution images made me think his expertise would be necessary. Time would prove that it was one of the best decisions I made. To complete the team, I selected 3 highly qualified technicians. Zhang, a measurement equipment specialist, Cardoso, a materials engineer experienced in collecting samples in extreme environments, and Singh, a life support systems technician. Each of them signed confidentiality agreements so strict they practically gave up their personal lives for the duration of the project. No one questioned the urgency or the absolute secrecy of the mission. The Nakamura name opened doors and silenced inquiries. Still, I could tell each team member had their own theories about what we might find down there, though they kept them to themselves, at least for now. The following 12 days were a whirlwind of preparation. Equipment testing, emergency simulations, technical briefings. The Tenshi Maru was being readied in a secret hangar in a remote area of the Pacific. It was the first time the vessel would be used for a real mission, and Nakamura Technologies engineers worked around the clock to make sure everything operated flawlessly. As the day of departure approached, I felt a mix of anxiety and excitement. My nights were short and restless, filled with dreams of abyssal depths and impossible structures. What would we find down there? Who could have built such a structure in the most inaccessible place on Earth? And why? None of us could have predicted the impact this discovery would have, not just on our lives, but potentially on humanity's understanding of its own history. We were about to uncover a mystery that challenged every established notion about the development of technological civilizations on our planet. On the eve of our departure, Nakamura appeared in person at the hangar. It was rare to see him outside his corporate tower in Tokyo. He inspected the Tenshi Maru in silence, then called me aside for a private conversation. "What do you expect to find down there?" he asked, his eyes locked on mine. "I don't know," I replied honestly, "but something tells me it wasn't built by human hands." He nodded slowly. "I trust your judgment. Bring me answers, not theories." The day of departure arrived with a spectacular sunrise over the Pacific. The orange sky felt like an omen, though I couldn't tell whether it was a good or bad one. The Tenshi Maru was towed into deep waters by a support vessel, far from prying eyes and commercial satellites. 7 people entered that capsule made of reinforced titanium and graphene, each carrying their own expectations and fears. Myself, the data analyst who never imagined leading an expedition like this. Eleanor, the scientist in search of knowledge. Ramirez, the stoic commander. Abbasi, the intrigued linguist, and the 3 technicians focused on making sure we all came back alive. The submersion procedure began with meticulous checks of all systems. Then, slowly, the Tenshi Maru began its descent into the unknown. The first few hours were silent, each of us lost in our own thoughts as we watched the sunlight vanish and total darkness consume the view beyond the portholes. We were on our way to encounter something that wasn't supposed to exist, something that could forever change our understanding of the world and of ourselves. And somehow, I had become the one responsible for leading this journey to the heart of the deepest mystery ever found on our planet. Absolute darkness surrounded us as the Tenshi Maru continued its descent. Only the soft glow of the internal monitors lit the tense faces of the crew. The silence was occasionally broken by the creaking of the hull, adjusting to the increasing pressure, and by Ramirez's periodic depth reports. 8,000 meters, he announced, his voice calm, like someone who had faced extreme situations before. All systems operating normally. The plan was simple in theory. Locate the structure, circle it for external documentation, and, if possible, investigate more closely. In practice, we were about to do something no one had ever done before: explore an artificial structure at the deepest point in the ocean. When we reached 9,000 meters, the sensors began to display unusual readings. Zhang, his eyes locked on his monitors, was the first to notice. "We're picking up a regular pulse," he reported, adjusting a few controls to confirm the data. "Consistent frequency, not a natural pattern." "Interference from our own equipment?" I asked, stepping closer to his station. Zhang shook his head. "Negative. It's external, and it's getting stronger as we go deeper." Eleanor and Abbasi exchanged meaningful looks. We were all thinking the same thing. Whatever that structure was, it wasn't just sitting at the bottom of the ocean. It was active in some way. With every meter we descended, the tension grew. The electromagnetic pulse became more pronounced, causing some of our more sensitive equipment to flicker. It was as if something was calling to us, inviting us to descend deeper into the abyss. Finally, at 10,200 meters, the Tenshi Maru's external floodlights pierced the perpetual darkness and revealed the impossible. Emerging gradually in the shadows was a perfectly symmetrical pyramid, approximately 120 meters tall. Its dark surface reflected our light in an odd way, as if absorbing part of it. "My God," Eleanor whispered beside me. none of us could look away. The structure defied everything we knew about human history and the physical possibilities of construction in such a hostile environment. It was too perfect to be natural, too ancient to be human. As we got closer, the details became clearer. The pyramid's surface wasn't smooth, but covered in intricate symbols and patterns that looked engraved or carved into the material. It wasn't ordinary stone. It looked like a dark metallic substance with unique reflective properties. "The pulses are intensifying," Zhang warned, his voice betraying concern for the first time. "They're starting to affect our navigation systems." Ramirez maneuvered the submersible around the base of the structure, maintaining a safe distance while we documented everything with our cameras. The symbols covered every centimeter of the surface, forming complex patterns that looked both geometric and organic. "There's something familiar about these symbols," commented Abbasi, his eyes fixed on the monitors showing the high-resolution images. "They don't match any known writing system, but there's an underlying mathematical structure that suggests an advanced form of communication." During our circumnavigation, we identified what appeared to be an entrance, a perfectly rectangular opening at the center of one of the pyramid's faces. It looked like a doorway, dark and mysterious. "Should we go in?" Ramirez asked, looking at me. All eyes turned to me. The responsibility of the decision weighed heavily on my shoulders. The rational part of my brain said we should be cautious, maybe return to the surface with the data we had already gathered. But another part, the one that brought me here, knew we couldn't stop now. "Let's assess our options," I said, trying to buy time to think. "What's the status of communications with the surface?" "Nearly non-existent," replied Singh, who was in charge of communications. "The pulses are causing significant interference. We've managed to send a few basic coded messages, but nothing substantial." I analyzed the data on my monitors. The Tenshi Maru was functioning well, despite the interference. We had oxygen and power for at least another 72 hours. If something went wrong, we had a way out. "Commander, approach the entrance, but keep enough distance to retreat quickly if necessary." Ramirez nodded and maneuvered the submersible with precision toward the opening. Our floodlights penetrated the darkness, revealing a perfectly smooth tunnel extending into the structure. "Readings inside the tunnel indicate it's navigable for our vehicle," reported Cardoso, analyzing sonar data. "The internal structure appears stable." "Proceed?" Ramirez asked again, his eyes fixed on the tunnel ahead. I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the decision. "Proceed," I confirmed, trying to keep my voice steady. The submersible moved slowly through the tunnel. The feeling was surreal. We were entering an artificial structure over 10 kilometers below the ocean's surface, something that defied all our historical and scientific understanding. The electromagnetic pulse was stronger inside, causing more interference in our equipment. Communications with the surface were completely lost. After traveling approximately 30 meters into the tunnel, it opened into a massive central chamber, at least 50 meters tall. Our floodlights couldn't illuminate the entire space at once, creating the impression that we were floating in an infinite void, dotted with geometric structures. The inside of the pyramid was hollow, filled with multiple platforms and internal structures that resembled scaffolding or tiers. And then, our lights picked up something extraordinary in the center of the chamber. A spherical object, roughly 2 meters in diameter, floating a few meters above the ground, pulsing with an intrinsically hypnotic bluish light. "It's the source of the pulse," Zhang confirmed, checking his flickering instruments. "It's emitting a complex electromagnetic pattern that's affecting all our systems." The sphere didn't appear to be suspended by any visible means. It simply hovered in the air, defying gravity. Its surface had an iridescent glow that subtly shifted in color as it pulsed. We decided to anchor the Tenshi Maru in a position that allowed us to observe most of the chamber. We needed to explore further, but caution was necessary. We prepared a small exploration robot to investigate before risking stepping out ourselves. The robot advanced slowly through the chamber, transmitting high-definition images. The cameras revealed more symbols on the inner walls, even more complex than those outside. But there was something else, what appeared to be control panels and interfaces embedded in the walls. "This is technology," Eleanor murmured, leaning over the monitor. "Advanced." Dr. Abbasi was completely absorbed, studying the symbols the robot transmitted. They don't match any known writing system, but there are patterns, recursive ones, like a code. Some sequences repeat in variations that suggest a mathematical language. The robot approached the floating spherical object under my remote instructions. When it got to about 1 meter away, something unexpected happened. The electromagnetic pulse intensified drastically, all of the robot's systems failed simultaneously, and lines of light appeared on the chamber walls, forming complex diagrams and more symbols. "It's a defense system," I suggested, watching the inert robot floating near the sphere. "Or maybe a reaction to our presence. Or an invitation," Abbasi offered, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "These lights on the walls, they seem to be organizing into a coherent pattern, as if it's trying to communicate." We discussed our options. The robot was lost, but we had gathered valuable information. The chamber didn't seem overtly hostile. After all, our presence was tolerated. The only way to learn more would be to risk stepping out in pressurized suits. "This is madness," Singh argued. "The pressure out there is enough to crush us instantly if there's any failure in the suits." "The suits were designed for this," Eleanor countered. "And this might be our only chance to understand what all of this is." After intense debate, we decided that a small team would go out. Myself, as expedition leader, Eleanor, for geological analysis and sample collection, and Abbasi, to document and attempt to interpret the symbols. Ramirez and the technicians would remain in the submersible, monitoring our vital signs and ready for an emergency extraction. Putting on the extreme pressure suits felt like preparing for a spacewalk. Every connection, every seal, checked multiple times. One mistake would mean instant death. As we completed the preparations, I couldn't help but think about who, or what, had built this place, and why. Finally, the external hatch opened, and we floated out of the Tenshi Maru into the ancient chamber. It was an indescribable feeling, to be physically present in a space that defied everything we thought we knew about Earth's and humanity's history. Like standing inside an alien temple or a technological sanctuary forgotten by time. Floating within the pyramid's chamber, I felt infinitely small in the face of the magnitude of our discovery. The panels on the walls responded to our presence, lighting up with diagrams and sequences of symbols that seemed to dance beneath the bluish light of the central spherical object. Our accelerated breathing echoed through the internal communicators of our pressurized suits. "This is extraordinary," Eleanor whispered, her voice almost reverent as she gently touched one of the walls. To my surprise, the panel reacted to her touch, glowing with new symbols and diagrams. "It's responding to us." We split up to cover more ground inside the chamber, maintaining constant communication and regularly checking our pressure and oxygen readings. Abbasi was drawn to a specific section of the wall, where the symbols appeared to form a continuous flow, like text or a narrative. "I found something that looks like a timeline or a historical record," he announced, his voice trembling with excitement. "Sequential images showing planetary changes, continental configurations." I approached where he stood. The panel displayed clearly identifiable representations of Earth, but with continental configurations we didn't recognize. Some showed a single supercontinent, others entirely different arrangements from the current ones. The sequence ended with something resembling our modern geography. "This could represent continental drift over hundreds of thousands of years," Eleanor suggested, who had joined us. "Or a documentation of active reformatting of the Earth's surface," Abbasi replied, pointing to symbols that repeated with each geographical change. "These symbols here, they appear consistently alongside the shifts, as if indicating a deliberate intervention." In another part of the chamber, we discovered what could only be described as a laboratory. There were preserved containers holding what appeared to be organic samples, intricate crystalline structures, and three-dimensional models floating in stable energy fields. One specific section displayed structures that closely resembled DNA, but with configurations unlike anything we knew. More complex, with additional elements not found in any known genetic code. But the most disturbing part was a section containing unmistakably humanoid representations. They were figures of beings similar to humans, but with slightly different proportions. Taller, larger skulls, longer and thinner fingers. The images were accompanied by sequences of symbols suggesting some form of cataloging or technical description. This looks like... Eleanor hesitated, as if unwilling to say what we were all thinking. A documentation of genetic engineering, I finished, feeling a chill down my spine despite the suit's thermal regulation system. While Eleanor carefully collected samples from the walls and preserved containers, Abbasi methodically photographed each panel of symbols, working on building a rudimentary dictionary of patterns. I felt inexplicably drawn to the central spherical object, the source of the pulse that had revealed the structure in the first place. I approached slowly, feeling a strange familiarity I couldn't explain. The sphere pulsed in sync with something, perhaps Earth's electromagnetic field, or some other parameter we didn't understand. Its surface had an iridescent metallic sheen, reflecting light in wavelengths impossible at that oceanic depth. "I'm getting strange readings from your suit," Ramirez warned through the comm. "Your heart rate is synchronizing with the sphere's pulse." I realized it was true. I could feel my heart beating in perfect time with the luminous pulse. It was as if the sphere recognized me, was calling to me. I resisted the almost irresistible urge to touch it and return to the others. After nearly 6 hours of exploration, we returned to the Tenshi Maru with our samples and data. The adrenaline of discovery gave way to the methodical work of preliminary analysis. The material collected from the structure was fascinating. A previously unknown metal alloy with crystalline properties that seemed to conduct and store energy in ways that defied our understanding of physics. But it was the initial dating analysis that truly left us baffled. "The material is ancient," Eleanor reported, staring in disbelief at the preliminary results. "Very ancient." "How old?" I asked, dreading the answer. "Radiometric dating puts it at over 500,000 years. The silence that followed was almost physical. 500,000 years, far predating the emergence of modern Homo sapiens, even older than the Neanderthals. "That's impossible," Singh murmured. "There must be contamination in the samples." "I ran the test 3 times, Eleanor replied, her voice steady despite the obvious shock. "The results are consistent. This redefines everything." Over the next 3 days, we methodically explored the structure, cataloging, photographing, and collecting samples. Each new discovery only deepened the mystery. We found additional chambers, some containing what appeared to be dormant machines, others with sealed containers we decided not to open. Abbasi made significant progress in interpreting the symbols. He didn't fully decipher the writing system, but identified enough patterns to grasp the general context of some sections. "It's an archive," he explained on our final night in the structure, as we shared a meal in the submersible's common area. "A record left by... them." "Them who?" Ramirez asked, still skeptical despite everything we had witnessed. "The symbols refer to them as the first ones," Abbasi said, consulting his notes. "There are constant references to shaping life on the surface, to creating specific conditions, to modifying organisms, and there are mentions of a cyclical return, as if they come and go periodically." "Like farmers checking on their crops," Eleanor suggested darkly. "Or scientists monitoring a long-term experiment," I added. Abbasi continued. "There are references to other locations like this one, in other deep parts of the ocean, as if it's a network of installations, for lack of a better word. We discussed the implications at length. If our interpretations were correct, the entire history of humanity would need to be reconsidered. We weren't simply the product of natural evolution, but possibly the result of deliberate intervention by an advanced civilization that existed 500,000 years ago. The next morning, as we prepared to return to the surface, the atmosphere in the central chamber changed drastically. The central spherical object began pulsing faster, with an almost frantic rhythm. The chamber lights shifted from blue to red, and new symbols appeared on the walls, glowing intensely. "What's happening?" Zhang asked, monitoring the submersible's sensors as they registered spikes in electromagnetic energy. "It's a countdown," Abbasi translated, hunched over his records, frantically comparing the new symbols to those he had cataloged. "Or a warning. Something about awakening." A subtle vibration ran through the entire structure, like the tremor before an earthquake. We didn't need a translation to know it was time to leave. We immediately initiated departure procedures, checking systems and preparing the Tenshi Maru for the long ascent. The pulse is increasing in frequency and amplitude, Singh warned. It's interfering with our propulsion systems. Divert power from non-essential systems, Ramirez ordered, fully embracing her role as commander. Prioritize propulsion and life support. As the submersible maneuvered to exit the chamber and re-enter the tunnel, I looked one last time at the spherical object through the portholes. Its glow had intensified to the point of being almost painful to look at, now pulsing at a frequency that made my whole body resonate. The Tenshi Maru managed to escape the structure, and we began our ascent. As we slowly rose toward the surface, I looked through the portholes at the pyramid left behind, glowing ever more intensely in the dark abyss. The red light it emitted was visible even from hundreds of meters away, like an ancient beacon signaling something we could not interpret. The data we carried would rewrite human history if made public. The material samples, the recordings, the photographic records, everything pointed to the fact that we were not the first intelligent beings on this planet. Not only that, but perhaps we weren't even a product of natural evolution, but of deliberate intervention. A species created or modified by the first ones, beings who mastered technologies we still do not understand, 500,000 years ago. During the slow ascent to the surface, while everyone was busy monitoring systems and analyzing data, I found myself reflecting on Mr. Nakamura's motivations. His lack of surprise when I showed him the first images, his prior preparations with the Tenshi Maru, the urgency of the mission. He knew, or at least suspected. We weren't there to discover something new, but to confirm something he had already intuited. And that growing pulse in the abyssal darkness. Was it a signal? A call? Or, more unsettling still, the beginning of an awakening long dormant? The references to a cyclical return took on a new and disturbing meaning in light of that apparent activation. As the pressure decreased and we neared the surface, a certainty consumed me. Mr. Nakamura hadn't sent us to uncover the past, but to glimpse the future. A future that may have been programmed 500,000 years ago, waiting only for the right catalyst to begin. And that future, I suspected as the first rays of sunlight pierced the water above us, might not be entirely ours to shape. Somewhere deep within the Mariana Trench, something ancient and patient had awakened. Something that may see itself as our creator, our observer, or our owner. The world we were returning to was the same as the one we had left. But our understanding of it, and of our place within it, had been irrevocably changed. We were the messengers of a truth few would be ready to hear. We were never truly alone, and perhaps, we were never truly free.